Arizona Territory, 1878. The sun was just cresting over the Mogollon Rim when the dust trail behind the wagon caught Dallas Whitlow's eye. He was riding east, alone, the leather reins loose in his calloused hands, when he saw the shape dragging behind the rear axle something human. He kicked his horse into a gallop. When he got close enough to see her, his stomach turned. A woman, bound at the wrists, was being dragged through the dirt by a thick rope tied to the back of the wagon. Her dress was torn to ribbons, her skin scraped raw, blood mixing with dust. She was barely conscious, her face slack, hair matted with dirt and blood. Dallas rode up hard, shouting, "Hey, stop that wagon!" The driver, a stocky man with a crooked hat and no conscience in his eyes, just spit and whipped the mules harder. Dallas did not shout again. He pulled his rifle from the scabbard and fired one shot into the air. When that did not work, he fired the second into the wagon's back wheel. The wagon lurched, tilted, then jerked to a stop as the rear axle snapped. Dallas leapt from his horse, knife already in hand. The woman's wrists were bound so tightly the rope had cut through skin. He dropped to his knees beside her, slicing through the fibers until her arms fell free. "Let me heal that," he said, barely above a whisper, his voice thick with something close to fury and something else he could not name, yet not fear, not pity. Something heavier. The woman blinked slowly, her lips cracked. You cut the rope." "Yes, ma'am." "You are safe now." He pulled off his bandana and started cleaning the blood from her face, his hands steady even as his chest ached just looking at her. The driver had jumped down and was now stomping toward them, face red. "You got no business." Dallas raised the rifle again. "Leave. Now. You drag a woman behind a wagon, you better pray law gets you before I do." The man took one look at Dallas's eyes and turned tail, cursing as he went. The mules still stood, dumb and twitching, tethered to the broken wagon. Dallas turned back to the woman. "Can you sit up?" she tried. Her body shook from the effort. "Yes," she rasped, though tears rolled out the corners of her eyes. He helped her sit, easing her back against his saddle blanket. Her skin was torn across her arms and shoulder, and dirty blood soaked the back of her dress. She was in no state to speak, but he knew she needed more than just rest. She needed care, safety. He poured water from his canteen onto a cloth and gently wiped her hands, her face, her neck. "What is your name?" he asked. "Tessa," she whispered. "Tessa Alcott." "All right, Miss Alcott." "I am Dallas Whitlow. You are going to be fine." She coughed, wincing. "I thought he was taking me to my cousin's ranch near Holbrook. He locked me in the wagon and tied me up when I tried to leave." Dallas's jaw clenched. "He will not touch you again." "Why would someone help me?" Her voice cracked. "Because no one deserves that." He gently wrapped her shredded palms with the last of his clean cloth, then helped her drink from the canteen. She watched him closely, her breath shallow but steadier now. "Do you have family?" he asked. She shook her head. "My parents died last winter. My uncle sent word that he found me a place, but I never met the man. I had no choice." Dallas looked out over the stretch of desert, heat already rising off the earth like smoke. "Well, you have a choice now." Her eyes met his wide, brown, and full of something he had not seen in a long time. Maybe trust, maybe hope. He lifted her carefully into the saddle, holding her steady as she winced. She gritted her teeth but did not cry out. "I will ride with you to the nearest doctor in Snowflake," he said. "It is a few hours, but you will make it." She leaned into him without meaning to, her head resting against his chest. He placed one hand gently on her side, the other guiding the reins. They rode in silence, except for the wind and the hooves and the quiet rhythm of her breathing. By the time they reached Snowflake, the sky was gold and her fever was rising. Dallas carried her into the doctor's cabin himself, refusing to let anyone else touch her. The doctor looked at Dallas, then at the woman in his arms. "What happened?" "She was dragged behind a wagon," Dallas said, his voice low, tight. "I cut her loose." The doctor nodded grimly. "Lay her down here." "I will do what I can." Dallas sat outside, hat in his hands, staring at the ground until the sky turned black. When the doctor finally came out, he said, "She is strong. Lucky to be alive, but strong." Dallas nodded once. "Can I see her? She is asking for you." He stepped into the warm lamplight of the cabin. Tessa was tucked beneath a quilt, her hair brushed back, the worst of the blood cleaned away. Her hands were wrapped, her wounds stitched, her eyes heavy-lidded but clearer. "You stayed," she said. "Of course I did," she blinked slowly. "I thought you might just ride off. I do not leave people behind." Tessa reached for his hand. He met her halfway. "I never said thank you," she whispered. "You do not have to. I want to." He let her hold his hand, their fingers threaded gently together. His heart thudded slow and steady under her fingertips. "Where will you go?" he asked. "I do not know," she said. "I have nothing." "You have me," he said, the words out before he could stop them. Tessa blinked, tears rising again but softer this time, not from pain. She squeezed his hand. "Then I will stay," she said. He smiled, the kind of smile he had not felt in years. "Good." The wind rolled in from the east 2 days later, stirring dust along the empty road that bordered the edge of Snowflake. Inside the clapboard house beside the doctor's cabin, Tessa sat upright in a borrowed chair, her wrists wrapped in clean muslin, her feet tucked beneath a quilt on her lap. Her skin still bore the faded imprint of wounds, but the swelling had gone down, and the fever had broken the night before. Dallas stood by the stove, feeding in split pine. The quiet between them was soft, undemanding. He hadn't asked anything more than her name since that first night. He hadn't needed to. She watched the way he moved, deliberate, without waste. When he handed her the tin mug of broth, he didn't look for praise. He just watched to see if her hands shook when she lifted it. They didn't. "You said you were headed east," she said, her voice steadier than it had been. "What for?" He poured himself a mug and leaned against the far wall, boots crossed at the ankle. "I was going to check on a friend's homestead near St. John's. He passed on last winter. His wife's still there, and I promised I'd help with the fence line." Tessa traced the rim of the mug with her thumb. "You'd leave right now." "I would have left 2 days ago." He met her eyes. "But you were half dead on my horse and needed someone to sit up nights." She looked down at her lap. "I don't know what to do now. I can't go back to Holbrook, not with that man still loose." "You won't have to." He set his mug down and crossed to the cabinet, rummaging until he found a parcel of flour and a tin of dried peaches. "You got any skill with a needle?" She blinked. "Sewing. Fence mending too, if you've a mind for it. But I meant thread and cloth. My friend Eliza's been saying for years the women out east won't send goods anymore unless they come with proper hems and straight seams. She sells to the male riders out of Fort Apache." "I can sew," Tessa said slowly. "Mama taught me every winter. She said idle hands invite sorrow." Dallas gave a short nod and started measuring flour into a basin. "Then I reckon there's a place for you yet." She watched him for a long moment. "You're not afraid of what people might think? Taking in a woman you don't know?" "I don't answer to people who think more of talk than they do of decency." Her fingers tightened on the mug. "My uncle sold me. I didn't see it until the wagon doors locked. I thought I was going to work in a kitchen. But that man, he said he paid for me." Dallas didn't speak right away. He stirred the mixture in the basin, the wooden spoon scraping against the sides. "You weren't his to buy," he said finally, "and you never will be." She drew in a slow breath. "What if there are others?" "Girls being sold, passed around like cattle, there are," he said. "But if you're asking whether I plan to ride out and hang every man who's done it, I've got 2 hands, not 10,000. I helped you. That's what I could do. I didn't mean to ask you to carry that, she said. You didn't. I picked it up. Later that afternoon, when the light stretched long across the floorboards, Tessa stood beside the window, her shoulders straight despite the pull of healing skin. She had brushed her hair, and it fell clean and dark down her back. Her voice was quiet when she said, "When I was little, I used to dream about standing in the middle of nowhere with no one knowing my name. I thought it'd feel free. But now—" Dallas didn't move from where he sat whittling a sliver of pine into a smooth point. "But now," she went on, "it feels like I might vanish if someone doesn't look at me." He raised his eyes slowly. "I see you." Her breath caught just a little. "You always this sure of your words?" "No, most times I keep them to myself." "But you've earned the truth." She let the curtain fall back into place and turned toward him. "You said Eliza's homestead needs help. Could you use another pair of hands for the ride?" His gaze didn't shift. "Only if they're yours." She stepped closer, stopping beside the table where his carving curled in wood shavings. "I don't want to be looked after," she said. "Not like a burden, but I wouldn't mind riding beside you a while." He stood slowly, the knife resting against the wood. "Riding with someone ain't about who leads, it's about who stays." She nodded once. "Then I'll stay." He reached for her hand, careful of the healing skin, and she let him guide her fingers into his. The light fell soft through the window, and for the first time since that rope had burned her wrists raw, she felt the ground beneath her hold steady. Dawn crept slow over the high plains as Dallas cinched the last strap across the mule's pack. The air held the brittle breath of late spring, dry, cold, and honest. Tessa stepped out from the doctor's cabin, her boots scuffing the step, a worn satchel across her shoulder. Her movements were steadier now, though she still favored her left side when she walked. "You sure you're ready?" Dallas asked, buckling the stirrup on her saddle. "I've been sitting too long," she said. "I'm ready to stretch." She mounted without help, jaw tight against the pull of half-healed skin. He watched but didn't offer his hand. She hadn't asked, and he'd learned that mattered to her. They rode southeast, following the old cattle trail that skirted the edge of the White Mountains. The land rolled open around them, piñon, scrub oak, and long folds of dry grass marked only by the thin line of wagon ruts. The silence between them wasn't heavy, just wide, like a canvas waiting on the first brush of color. By midday, they'd crossed into thicker timber where the light dappled the horses' backs, and the air smelled of bark and creekstone. When they stopped to water the animals, Tessa knelt at the stream, dipping her fingers into the current. "My mother used to say rivers remember," she said, not looking up. "That they carry every story they ever touched." Dallas crouched nearby, filling the canteens. "You believe that?" "I think some things linger, even after the people are gone." He didn't answer, but his gaze held to her a moment longer than the silence needed. They made camp near the base of a shallow ridge where the wind couldn't reach their fire. Dallas laid out their bedrolls with a respectful space between, and Tessa gathered pine needles for kindling. As the stew simmered, she sat with her legs drawn up, blanket across her shoulders. The firelight caught the edge of her cheek, where a faint line of pink still marked what she'd survived. "You ever think about settling down?" she asked. "Someplace quiet with land of your own." Dallas poked the coals, the embers flaring. "I used to. Thought I might run cattle with my brother back before the fever took him. After that, I kept moving. Because it hurt to stay. Because I didn't know what else to do." Tessa twisted a strand of hair between her fingers. "I used to keep a book of pressed flowers. I'd walk the edge of the property line and pick one new bloom each week. I don't know why I'm thinking of it now. Maybe because you're starting over." She looked at him, eyes shadowed but clear. "I don't want to forget what happened, but I also don't want it to keep being the only part of me people see." Dallas nodded once. Then let it be one page in the book. Not the whole story. They passed the stew between them, eating in quiet rhythm. When the fire burned low, Tessa lay back on her bedroll, staring at the dark canopy of stars overhead. "I thought I was going to die out there," she said softly. "I know," Dallas replied. He didn't lie beside her, just sat near with his rifle across his knees, keeping watch. "And now," she asked, he turned his head, "now you're alive and free." She reached out across the stretch of packed dirt and found his hand. He didn't startle, didn't pull away. He just let her rest there, skin to skin, as the fire breathed low and the night folded in around them. Neither of them said another word. They didn't need to. The warmth between their palms said enough. They reached Eliza's homestead by late afternoon on the 6th day. The land unfolded in low, rolling hills, edged by willow and cottonwood, where a narrow creek wound its way behind the house. A rail fence stretched long and straight across the pasture, its posts weathered silver by years of sun. The house itself was modest, 2 rooms and a lean-to kitchen, but well kept, with a smokehouse beside it and a garden gone wild with spring. Eliza stood on the porch when they rode in, wiping her hands on her apron. Her hair was graying at the temples, her sleeves rolled to the elbow, and she had the look of someone who'd buried both hardship and joy without letting either break her. "Dallas Whitlow," she said, stepping down from the stoop. "About time you showed your face." "I brought help," he said, dismounting. Tessa slid down from the saddle slowly, keeping her weight even. She met Eliza's eyes and offered a nod. Eliza looked her over with a quiet, measuring gaze, then extended a hand. "Got 2 rooms and more fence than I care to dig. If you're willing to work, you're welcome." "I am," Tessa said. "Thank you." That evening they ate on the porch stew Eliza had started before sunset and biscuits baked hard but honest. The sky was painted in streaks of violet and rust, the kind of light that made everything look gentler than it felt. Tessa sat with her back to the post, the hem of her skirt brushing the floorboards, watching the last rays settle on the grass below. Eliza poured coffee into tin cups, then went inside without a word, leaving them alone with the hush of crickets and the creak of wood settling into night. Tessa turned her face toward Dallas. "Sometimes I can't tell if I'm still trying to outrun what happened or if I'm already past it." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Maybe it's neither. Maybe you're just learning how to walk without it weighing down every step." She nodded slow. "When I first saw you ride up, I thought you were just another man who'd look away." "I almost did," he admitted. "But something about the way you held on, bloodied and half-conscious and still fighting, I couldn't." She tilted her head. "You've lost someone." He didn't flinch at the change in subject. "My mother when I was young, my brother later. I never stopped carrying them, just learned where to set them down when the day's done." Tessa looked out across the pasture. "I thought I'd marry some shopkeeper's son, live quiet. Raise children who'd never know what it means to be sold like livestock." "You can still have quiet," Dallas said. "You can still have a life that's yours." "Can I have that with you?" He looked at her, not startled, not hesitant, just steady. "If you want it, yes." She reached for his hand, not to lean on, not to be held, just to hold. His fingers closed around hers, warm and certain. "I want to plant something," she said. "Not just flowers, beans or squash, something that feeds." "We'll clear a patch near the creek tomorrow," he said. "Soil's softer down there." She smiled, but not the kind that fades quick. The kind that stays. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of damp earth and wood smoke. Dallas didn't let go of her hand, and she didn't ask him to. They sat like that until the stars came out, not hiding, not running, just breathing in the stillness they'd earned. By early June, the land had softened under summer's hush. Tessa stood barefoot in the creek bed, her skirts hitched above the knees, lifting stones from the shallows and tossing them onto the bank where Dallas built the edge of the garden plot. The sun warmed her shoulders, and she moved with the easy rhythm of someone who'd begun to live forward, not just away from something. Dallas straightened from his crouch, wiped his brow with the back of his wrist, and glanced toward her. "You always work this quiet?" "I talk when there's something worth saying," she replied, setting down another smooth stone. "And I like the sound of water better than most voices." He smiled toward the trees, not at her, not needing her to notice. That evening, as they sat beneath the cottonwood trees, Dallas pulled a folded scrap from his coat pocket and handed it to her. The paper was creased, the ink faded. She opened it carefully. It was a deed, handwritten and signed, dated 3 years earlier. He tapped the bottom corner. "It's in my name, but the land's more than I need. You helped clear it. You should have a stake." She looked at him, stunned still. "You're giving it to me. I'm asking if you'll stay and build it with me." Tessa stared at the handwriting, then at the creek, then at the man who'd pulled her out of the dust and never asked anything in return. "You sure you want your name tied to mine?" "I'm not offering land," he said. "I'm offering a life." Her hand trembled slightly as she folded the deed again. "I don't need paper to stay." "I know," he said gently. "But I'd like you to have it anyway." Over the following weeks, they planted rows of beans and potatoes, added a chicken coop behind the lean-to, and he built her a writing table by the front window. She never asked for it, but the way her fingers brushed the edge the first morning said more than words. Dallas carved a new gate post with the initials TA etched beside his own. They didn't speak about it, but she touched the letters each time she passed, as if reminding herself she belonged. One evening, as the wind settled and the light turned honeyed across the fields, Tessa brought out a tin box wrapped in oilcloth. She laid it on the table and opened it slowly, revealing a pressed bloom brittle and pale, nestled between folded cloth. "I found it in my satchel," she said. "One of the last I picked before leaving home." Dallas leaned over to look. "What is it?" "Blue flax. Used to grow along the fence behind the barn." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Let's plant it here." She blinked hard, then nodded. "I'd like that." The next morning they sowed the seeds along the edge of the pasture, beside the split rail fence where the soil was thin but sunlit. She knelt to press each one into the earth. He stayed beside her, silent, until the last was laid down. Summer deepened, and the house filled with small, ordinary things. The scent of coffee in the mornings, the creak of the porch boards under bare feet, the sound of her laughter when he mismeasured flour. She stitched curtains from flour sacks and taught herself to mend boots. He built shelves for her books, even though they only had 3 between them. One evening in late August, after the rain had left the world smelling clean, she stepped out into the yard, hair damp and loose, barefoot in the mud. Dallas followed, hands in his pockets, watching her tilt her face to the sky. "I've been thinking," she said, not turning, "about the way you look at me." "What about it?" "You look like you're waiting to ask me something." "I have been." She turned to him slowly, the air warm between them. "Then ask." Dallas stepped closer, his voice low. "Will you marry me, Tessa Alcott?" She didn't speak right away. She reached up, touched the scar that curved near his temple, then moved her fingers to his jaw. "Yes," she said. "I will." They married under the cottonwoods, with Eliza standing as witness and the creek murmuring nearby. Tessa wore a blue dress she'd sewn herself, and Dallas wore the same coat he'd arrived in, brushed and mended. They said their vows with hands clasped and eyes steady. No grand speeches, just quiet promises made with the strength of things already proven. That evening they danced in the dirt yard barefoot, her head against his chest and his hand at her back. Years passed. The flax came up every spring, bright and stubborn. The garden grew wide, the fence held strong, and the sound of laughter echoed often from the porch. They added a second room to the house, then a third. They never spoke of the rope or the wagon again, not because it was forgotten, but because it no longer owned her. She kept the deed in the same tin box as the flower. He carved her name into the beam above the door. And on quiet nights, when the fire burned low and the wind moved through the grass, he'd reach for her hand, and she'd meet him halfway, every time. They lived the rest of their days in that house with the wide fields and the creek that remembered everything, side by side, in love, at peace.